Hey there, budgeteers. Are you ready to unlock the power of each payday and take control of your finances like a boss? Introducing the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits. This isn't your average budgeting tool. Oh no. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll harness the unique rhythm of your paychecks to supercharge your financial game. Say goodbye to the confusion of monthly budgets and hello to the clarity of every payday. You'll know exactly when money is coming in and when it's going out, giving you the edge you need to stay on top of your finances. But that's not all. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll easily spot whether you're rocking a surplus or facing a deficit. Armed with this knowledge, you'll make informed decisions that set you up for financial success. It's time to transform your relationship with money and create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom. Get your hands on the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and start making every dollar count. Don't let financial stress hold you back. Create a better plan for your money and seize the power of your pay period and thrive with the Payday Power Planner. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now to grab your free copy and unleash your financial potential. On this best of episode of the New Money Habits podcast, we're going to discuss how emotions affect the way you manage money. What's up, budgeteers, and welcome to the New Money Habits podcast. I'm your host and one of the co-founders of New Money Habits, Coach Nino Villa. And today on the New Money Habits podcast, our friend Sarah and I discuss how feelings like regret, boredom, anger, stress, fear, love, and relief can impact the way you manage your money. If you have any questions, be sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Or tell your smart speaker to play the latest episode of the New Money Habits podcast. If you want to help out the show, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. We cannot thank you enough for those 5-star ratings and reviews. They truly help us to spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money. Now let's get into today's episode. So, Sarah, when you say a bunch of emotions are kind of bubbling up, what are you talking about?
Well, it's funny, Nino, is emotions play such a huge part in our financial decision making, right? And I think we've got a really good episode. We're going to talk about all the ways, not all of them, lots of ways that it can show up, right, in our finances. But I think it's important to remember that, emotions don't really, they shouldn't hold a place when we're making financial decisions. And I know people are going to be like, well, how the heck do you do that? Well, I'm still working on it. I am not the expert and can't say do this and do that. But I think that we allow emotions to have such a huge influence in our decisions, right? And when we do that, I believe we kind of lose some of our own power and some of our own control. And it oftentimes leads to feelings of regret, feelings of frustration, feelings of, I need to justify this, and buyer's remorse comes in, right? When we make a lot of purchases, using our emotions as the leader in those decision-making processes. So I think I'm excited to share some of these, how they show up, and give our listeners, give all of you out there some ideas, because you may not be aware of them. I certainly wasn't for many years.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a little cyclical, where the emotions charge a decision, that charge an emotion, that charges, and it's just this cycle. And so we'll talk maybe at the end too about some ways to try to discharge some of these emotions. Some things came to mind when you said, how the heck do I do that? Right. And I'm right there with you, Sarah, not the expert. Emotions still get the better of me. In fact, some of the stories I'm prepared to share with our listeners today are just that. They're personal stories of how emotions affected some things. But let's start off with an emotion that I think it's kind of obvious, but maybe most people aren't even thinking about it when it happens to them. And that is boredom. boredom is an emotion and it affects the way you spend money. So, Sarah, you got any personal or client stories that relate to boredom?
Oh boy. Yes. Yes, I do. And I think this is something that certainly my clients, I want to share a couple of stories with clients here. And I want to point out that the clients were not aware that this emotion was so greatly affecting their finances, right? They weren't aware until I started bringing it up, until we started talking about it, right? When are these purchases, when are these decisions being made? Well, I'm bored. And for one, it's when she's at work. She works at a desk job, and sometimes work is kind of slow. There's not a whole lot going on, and so what she does is she finds herself on that good old Amazon app, right?
Oh
And
boy.
scrolling and looking, and it's that boredom that really fuels it, because she's not doing anything else. She picks up her phone, that app is on there, right? And it's so easy for all of us to do that. They make it easy. Companies make it easy. Hey, download this app. So you can just get in, one click pay, and you're done, right? So there's some other things, involved in this, but her boredom really gets to her sometimes. And then what happens is she makes these purchases, and then a couple of days later, these things come in the mail. Oftentimes she didn't even remember making them, right? Because it was
Wow.
almost not a conscious, fully conscious decision, because the boredom was what was fueling it, right? And then feelings of like having to justify them. Oh, well, I've been looking at this for a while, or, oh, I really need this. And so we've really had talks that I don't want you to justify your purchases. If you're feeling like you're justifying a purchase, then there's something else going on, right? Making the purchase isn't the problem. It's that you allowed boredom to take over, right? And it influenced your purchasing, your buying decisions. And if you haven't planned for those decisions, you haven't planned for those purchases, it does throw off your money plan, which then leads to stress, frustration, because you've gone over budget, or you don't have the money for something else, or you have to pay a bill late, right? And so boredom really greatly affects your financial life, your money plan each month. Similarly, I've got a client that does a lot of shopping in the evenings, going to bed, trying to fall asleep. She's bored and trying to fill her mind, right? And does a lot of shopping for the dogs, right? And then gets up the next morning and didn't remember making those purchases until going over the bank account and thinking, what the heck did I purchase? Well, that boredom really influenced her decisions, right? And again, it just leads to that hamster wheel that you had mentioned, like you get on and making this decision, then you're feeling frustrated, then maybe some guilt comes in, and these are things that we don't want to experience with our money.
Yeah. Um, there's going to be ways to address boredom at large, but for your client who is susceptible to Amazon, that's why the wish list is so great, right? Like, just put it in the wish list. Don't put it in the cart. Put it in the wish list. You'll feel like you did something, and you're still spending the time doing the same thing, except at the end of it, what you're not doing is spending any of your dollars. But that's neither here nor there. I digress.
Well, and I think that's a great tip, right? I mean, that really is a great tip. Don't put it in your cart, put it in your wish list. So later on, you can go through when you're planning to make some purchases, when you've, planned, you're not letting boredom take over. You can go through your wish list and see, is this still something that I've planned for, that I want, that is going to make my life easier, what have you. I actually recommended, and this is another great tip, I actually recommended she take the app off of her phone and disconnect her bank account card, her debit card, disconnect it from the app. So you can't just do the one click. You need to physically put in your card each time you make a purchase. And so what does that do? You're more intentional with that purchase. It's not just this click the buy button and it's done, right? So there are some steps that you can take when boredom comes to call, right? There are steps that you can take so that you're not actually making the purchase.
Yeah, and that makes me think about how we live in a world of convenience and we all like things as simple as possible. And to your earlier point, companies have gotten really good at removing as many barriers as they possibly can, right? Like save your payment information, save your shipping information so that you don't have to repetitively put these things into play. It makes me think, excuse me, that as financial coaches, one of the things I'm doing with my clients subconsciously, but now I'm conscious of it, is I'm putting barriers in place so that you have to jump these hurdles and basically convince yourself that this is truly something I need or want and that it's been planned for. And so I'm going through all of the steps to acquire it. I think about even something as simple as the cash envelope system, right? It's taking money out of the bank, putting it in a envelope, only having that envelope with you. Like you're putting in these barriers so that you're more mindful about how you manage your money.
I love it.
Hey there, budgeteers. You know, good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So, what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and He cannot be in the presence of sin. So this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves. So, all right, so boredom is certainly one. I think more people are going to be able to relate with this next emotion, and that is stress. We all deal with stress. There's different levels of stress. There are different stressors, different things that stress people out. There are things that my wife worries about that I don't worry about. There are things that I worry about that she doesn't worry about. We all deal with stress, but that also means stress can be one of those things, again, that affects our financial plan. The plan that we've created can get blown up real quickly if we don't manage our stress well. So I think you have another client story for stress.
I do. And, this one comes from a client that has younger children at home and had a car that wasn't kind of breaking down a lot, and they didn't want to keep putting money into it. And they used the words, I had to buy a new car. I had to buy a new car. And because they were so stressed out with the other one breaking down. And listen, I have been there. Probably going to share another story, a personal story about that in, later on in this episode. But when you're so stressed out, I think what happens is you're allowing that stress to overtake some of your more rational thoughts, right? And you don't allow yourself the gift of working through the scenarios. You go into the car lot and people, car salesmen, I'm not talking bad about them, but they're really good at their job and they're there to help you purchase a vehicle. They don't care what your monthly budget is, right? They don't care if you can actually afford those payments or what those payments look like. They're there to sell you a vehicle. And sometimes when you're so stressed out, Nino, about, is your car in good condition or I have to put more money into it? The stress, right? It kind of overtakes your other, I'm going to call them rational thoughts, and some of the other process that you could take. And, this particular client there, they have 2 new vehicles and those payments are over $1,100 a month, which is over 25% of their monthly income. Now,
wow.
That leads to more stress because those payments are so high, right? And so they used stress as that emotion to purchase the new vehicle, which then just is causing more stress because the monthly payments are so high. And we could go into all the other things, the kind of the snowball effect of that. But the main point here is when stress is that emotion that's guiding your decisions, more often than not, I've seen it actually causes more stress in your life. It does not relieve that original stressor that you had.
Yeah, that's very relatable. As I shared on the podcast about a year ago, we were dealing with that same thing. A car that was constantly breaking down. I wanted so very badly just to continue to repair it. But when it was creeping up over $10,000 in repairs, it was, do I continue down this road that has no end in sight, or do I buy a new car? And so like that stress of, don't I? So my advice in that situation is get a second opinion, right? Your opinion is, I got to get out of this car. I need to buy a new car. Right? But truth be told, get a second opinion, work around some things, or at least get that second opinion to start to reduce the stress of the situation that is causing you to make that decision, right? Yes, I finally decided to let go of the van. We bought a new car. We're in a lease payment, but that was not a knee-jerk reaction. That was a methodical, go through the process, look at the numbers, go through all the scenarios, and not get yourself into $1,100 worth of car payments. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not saying not to purchase a newer vehicle or new to you, right? Like that's not what we're talking about, but we're talking about when that stress is the guiding light of that decision making, right? Then your brain, you're not making the rational decision. Your brain is not looking at all the other things that are going to come from that decision, right? And
Right.
So just like you said, get a second opinion. I think that that's really powerful, and look at all your options. And I'm just going to put a quick plug in. There are some really great used cars out there, guys. And if you have to have a car payment, I'm not going to even go down that road. There's nothing wrong with
Right.
a car payment necessarily, right? If you need a vehicle or a lease payment or anything else, we're not demonizing that part of it, but really we're just bringing to light the emotion that led to that decision, and then what then is the consequence of that decision because you let that emotion guide you.
Yeah, trying to make a net neutral emotional decision, like trying to get the emotion out of it. Real quick, I'll even mention one of the options, one of the scenarios we had to play out is we have a second car that is paid for. It's the car that we bought when we first found out my wife was pregnant with our first child. And so it's old and it's got a lot of miles on it and it's a bit smaller. But one of the things we considered was, can we make it work on the older car and just one? And we really talked that through. And we came to the conclusion that we couldn't, but at least we truly considered it. And so that's just one of those things to kind of get the emotion out of it and just say, hey, do we have another option here?
Right.
Hey there, budgeteers. Are you tired of feeling like your finances are running the show? Well, it's time to flip the script and take charge of your money with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is about empowering you with the knowledge and tools you need to make savvy money moves and build a solid financial foundation. Here's the deal. We're offering a free discovery session to kickstart your journey to financial freedom. Yep, you heard me right. Free. In this session, one of our experienced coaches will help you to pinpoint your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We're talking about mastering your money mindset, picking up practical money management skills, and having someone to hold you accountable along the way. So, if you're ready to kiss financial stress goodbye and say hello to a brighter financial future, then schedule your free session today to create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom.
Right.
I want to shift to another emotion that's very closely related to stress. Oftentimes, stress can lead to fear. And fear can be, fear of the unknown. It could be fear of lots of things. I have a client story that's specific about fear of missing out, which is definitely something that this culture experiences a lot of nowadays. We all have FOMO, and I think that's more so true when we look at things like the housing market, or we look at like our retirement accounts, and it's like, man, I think I missed out on getting into the housing market when it was lower, or I missed out on this really interesting stock tip, or I missed out on the GameStop price hike thing a couple of years ago, or I missed out on cryptocurrency. Fear of missing out is something we're definitely dealing with. And so then people want to get involved in things, sometimes a little ahead of schedule, or just a little bit premature. And so I have a client who in the past has missed out on acquiring investment property. There had been either family situations or close like relatives or whatever, where properties were being let go. He could have picked them up pretty much on the cheap. And so, he felt like he missed out. And so another opportunity came and he pulled the trigger. And here we are about 8 months, 12 months into that decision. And it's been a learning process. There's been ups and downs, and there's been frustration, and there's been excitement, and there's been just another array of emotions after the decision was made. We're going to take this opportunity because we've missed opportunities like it in the past, and we're not going to miss this one. We're just not. Okay, you're in a financial position where you can think it might be a little bit premature, but just understand that you're going to learn a lot, and education usually costs you, right? Whether you're paying tuition to a university or you're paying tuition to life, you're going to pay to learn this lesson. And so I just think it's less about their decision specifically and more about what drove their decision. And that is that fear of missing out. And I think that it affects a lot of us, that we get into a place, I know that 2, maybe 3 years ago, I got into the cryptocurrency market because it was kind of blowing up at that point. And at first I saw some impressive gains, but I'm a holder. I'm not into this whole day trading thing. So my fear of missing out got me to buy. And I saw some huge gains, and I did not sell. And I still hold those assets today. And they're worth a fraction of what they were worth when I bought them. And so my fear of missing out caused me to act in one way, but apparently not act in the way that I would have actually made some money. Anyway, I digress. FOMO. It affects how you spend your money.
It definitely does. And and I see that. I personally have never been like the FOMO type. I just, it's never been an emotion that has played a huge part for me. My husband, it played a part for him. for a while. We've worked through a lot of that now, but I see it with a lot of clients, and even, some of our friends, and people that we hang out with. You see the FOMO kind of creeping in, like, oh, everybody's got the new phone. I need to go and get the new phone. What am I, they talk it up. So this, I think, these things are so common. So, any of you listeners, any of you guys are feeling this, don't feel, bad or, we're not coming down on you. I think part of this is just to share that this is so common. These emotions are so common for us, but we don't talk about them a lot. The FOMO has never been a huge thing for me, but fear has definitely played a part. And just yesterday, and this is a little bit different take on, how fear has shown up for me. But just yesterday, I was going through and doing tracking of our spending over the past couple weeks. We've been really busy. I did get behind in some of, our tracking. And as I'm writing down all the numbers, James and I have spent more in the past couple weeks and I'll label these air quote extra categories that we don't normally contribute to or we don't normally spend out of, right? And we have spent a lot more out of those categories than normal. And so this fear, we're just like, oh, crap, like we've spent so much money. And, then this fear, like, how are we going to pay for this? And what, how did this happen? And all of these things, and this scarcity, because I've talked a lot about my own scarcity when it comes to money, this comes up for me, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to, take care of this? And then I had to look and remind both of us that, part of us working the Sturgis rally, was so we specifically put money aside for these extra expenses. We specifically created, a little sinking fund because we knew that we wanted to make some of these purchases. But yesterday when I was tracking, that fear clicked in because it's one of my default emotions. Fear is just one of my default emotions. And that's what came up first, is like, man, oh man. But then I had to remind myself, and I got my sticky note here with it. I had to remind myself, Sarah, you guys saved for these purchases, right? So get rid of the fear. Fear has no place here. You saved specifically for these things. We saved $1,500 for these purchases. We spent $1,544. So we spent $44 more than what we had planned. I'm okay with that. But I really had to pull in the reminder of, like, fear doesn't have to be your first emotion here. You planned for this already, right? And I want to bring that up. So if you have these emotions, it's okay to remind yourself, hey, this doesn't have to be your default emotion, right? It doesn't have to be the one that guides, and you don't have to feel guilty for making those purchases. You planned for it. It's okay. Move on.
Yep. You should not feel guilty about planned for purchases, but when you kind of lose sight of, I planned for this, I have money set aside for it. I get it. That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.